My name is Anna Vance, and for 22 years, I've worn this badge." That day, they laughed at it. They laughed right in my face, a chorus of derision echoing off the cold steel and concrete. They pointed, their faces twisted in sneering mockery at the simple worn shield pinned over my heart, treating it like a child's toy. But they had no concept of the fire they were playing with. They couldn't possibly know that in the space of a single breath, in just 30 seconds, their entire world of carefully constructed power was about to be turned to ash. Their charismatic king, the man they feared and followed, was about to be dethroned, and I wouldn't have to lay a single hand on him. It was all because I carried a secret, a truth he had buried under years of lies, and the time had finally come to unearth it. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. It helps a lot. Section 1. The Lay of the Land. For more than 2 decades, the scent of antiseptic and simmering despair has been the first thing I notice when I start my shift. I've walked the cold, unforgiving floors of Northwood Maximum Security Penitentiary, one of the most volatile institutions in the country. It's a place where the air itself feels heavy, thick with a tension so palpable you could choke on it. For 22 years, I have been a correctional officer, one of the few women on the line, a constant presence tasked with maintaining the fragile membrane between order and absolute chaos. Every single day is a grueling test of will, of patience, and sometimes of your very soul. You learn to read the silences, to understand that a sudden quiet in the mess hall is infinitely more dangerous than the loudest riot. You learn to see the flicker of humanity behind the hardened criminal, and more importantly, the chilling monster that can hide behind a disarmingly charming man. My badge isn't the gleaming, ornate shield you see in movies. It's a plain, state-issued piece of metal, its edges worn smooth and silver from decades of service, pinned faithfully over my heart. It just bears the state seal and my identification number, 734. It's simple, yes, but to me, it has always represented everything. It's the weight of the oath I swore, a silent promise to uphold order in a world meticulously built on disorder. I earned the wear on this badge breaking up vicious yard fights, talking desperate men down from the brink, and enduring an endless barrage of venomous taunts from inmates who believed they had nothing left to lose. At 42, with more gray streaking my hair than I care to admit, I genuinely believed I had seen every facet of human nature. I'd seen remorseless killers weep over a crumpled letter from a child and small-time crooks transform into profound prison philosophers. I thought I understood the intricate, brutal ecosystem of this concrete jungle. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for Marcus Kane. He didn't just challenge the system, he warped and twisted it into his own personal fiefdom. And in doing so, he turned my world, and the meaning of my simple badge, completely upside down. It all began on a sweltering summer morning in C Block, the volatile heart of the prison. C Block is where the system sends its nightmares, the lifers, the gang leaders, the ones deemed too dangerous for anywhere else. I was making my usual rounds, the steady rhythmic click of my boots a familiar echo against the steel bars and polished concrete. That's when Marcus and his disciples fixed their eyes on me. Marcus Kane was the undisputed, unofficial king of C Block. He wasn't the most physically imposing man, but his power was entirely psychological, a web of charisma and fear woven with chilling precision. He was in his late 30s, serving a 25-to-life sentence for racketeering, with a serpent tattoo that coiled menacingly up his neck and eyes that held you in place more effectively than any shackles. He possessed a smooth, velvety voice that could charm the birds from the trees one moment and strip you of your dignity the next. His crew, a loyal pack of hyenas serving time for everything from fraud to extortion, shadowed his every move. As I walked past their designated table in the day room, one of them, a lanky convict they called Slim, let out a loud, performative snort. "Look at that little tin badge," he sneered, his voice projecting for the entire block to hear. "Officer Vance thinks she runs the place with her little dollar store security pin." A wave of cruel, sharp laughter rippled through Kane's crew and then, like a contagion, spread through the entire block. Inmates I'd known for years, men with whom I'd shared moments of genuine human connection, all joined in the chorus of ridicule. Kane leaned back in his chair, a slow, deeply arrogant smirk spreading across his face. He let the laughter swell, savoring it, before he delivered the final cut. "Yeah, what's that thing even for, Anna? You think that gives you power here? You're just the help with a fake shield." The mockery stung more than any physical blow ever could. I'd heard countless insults over the years, but this felt different. This was a calculated performance, a public stripping of my authority. Inside these walls, this simple piece of metal was the only symbol separating order from anarchy. It was my authority. It was my pride. As protocol demanded, I kept my expression a complete blank. Never let them see they got to you. That's the first rule you learn. But deep inside, a cold, furious fire began to burn in my gut. They saw a simple badge. They didn't see the woman wearing it. And they had absolutely no idea that I had been watching Marcus Kane for months, slowly and meticulously piecing together the monstrous truth he was so desperately hiding. Section 2. The Unraveling Thread. In prison, alliances are the currency of survival. Men form bonds, trade favors, and create their own societies to endure the crushing weight of time. But as officers, we see the cracks in those bonds. We see the debts being called in, the favors turning sour. Marcus Kane had expertly crafted an image of himself as a benevolent patriarch, the untouchable protector of C-Block. He'd arrange for a weaker inmate to get an extra food tray or pass a clandestine message to a loved one on the outside. He earned their unwavering loyalty through these small, meticulously calculated acts of supposed kindness. But I had started to notice a disturbing pattern. A favor from Marcus was never a gift, it was a high-interest loan. He would help someone, and in return, he'd acquire a piece of information, a secret he could weaponize as leverage. He masterfully pitted inmates against each other, creating conflicts that only he could resolve, which in turn only solidified his power. His greatest, most insidious trick was convincing everyone that he was the source of peace when, in fact, he was the architect of their chaos. The first concrete clue fell into my lap during a long, oppressively quiet night shift. As I made my rounds, gliding past Kane's cell, I heard a low, muffled voice cutting through the silence. It was a smuggled burner phone, a cardinal sin within these walls, a severe violation. I deliberately slowed my pace, pretending to check something on my logbook, my heart beginning to pound. I angled my body just so, and I listened. He was talking to someone on the outside, his voice dripping with condescending amusement. "They think I'm their savior," he chuckled, a low, guttural sound. "Every last one of them. But I've got their families' accounts drained dry. They send me their hard-earned money to hold for them. The absolute fools." He laughed again, a sound devoid of any humor. "By the time they get out, they'll have nothing. They'll be working for me for years just to pay off the debt I invented for them." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a contraband phone. This was a sophisticated, soul-crushing betrayal on a massive scale. He was preying on the one fragile lifeline these men had left, the love and support of their families. He was systematically siphoning their commissary funds, convincing them to have their desperate families send money to outside accounts that he, and he alone, controlled. His own crew, the very men who would have taken a blade for him without hesitation, were his primary victims. My first instinct was to storm the warden's office. But protocol is designed for a system that functions on the surface. Kane had eyes and ears everywhere. He bragged about it. A report would be filed, paperwork would be generated, but before any investigation could gain traction, the news would slither back to him. The evidence, or worse, the witness, would simply disappear. So, I made a choice that would redefine my career. I started my own secret, meticulous log. I became a ghost in the machine, watching, listening, and documenting everything. I'd spend hours after my shift reviewing security footage, noting the precise times Kane visited other inmates, cross-referencing them with the exact moments they made their commissary orders. I started connecting his activities with old, dismissed complaints from years past about missing funds. Then, anonymous notes started appearing, slipped under my office door, desperate, terrified pleas from men who felt the walls of Kane's scam closing in around them. One of them was a young inmate named Tommy. He was a kid, really, barely in his 20s, doing a short bid for a first-time offense, completely out of his depth. Marcus had taken Tommy under his wing, a predator grooming his prey, promising to protect him from the sharks. I watched as Tommy began to idolize Kane, hanging on his every word. Then, one day after mail call, I saw him standing frozen in the hallway, his face ashen, a letter from his mother trembling in his hand. His family had sent the last $100 they had. It was gone. Marcus had graciously helped him set up the transfer. Seeing the hollow, shattered look in Tommy's eyes, I felt that same cold fury building in my own chest. It was no longer just about the rules. It was about the profound, devastating human cost. If you're still here with me, don't forget to subscribe, activate notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone. Section 3. The Breaking Point. That's right around when the daily mockery of my badge began. It was a relentless, strategic performance. "Badge Girl is making her rounds," Kane would announce from his table, and his crew would erupt in jeers and laughter. The insults were a tool, designed to systematically erode my authority, to paint me as a powerless woman in a man's world. I'd go home at night, my body aching from the tension, and stare at my badge sitting on my dresser. I'd run my thumb over the worn number, 734, and wonder if they were right. Was it just a meaningless symbol in a place where real power was measured in fear and brutality? Weeks bled into months. The taunts grew more pointed, more personal. Kane was getting bolder, intentionally testing my limits, enjoying the spectacle. He had his crew slip crude, degrading drawings of my badge being flushed down a toilet under other inmates' cell doors. He was actively campaigning to turn the entire block against me, to isolate me completely. My post became a constant hotbed of minor, planted contraband, just enough to mire me in paperwork and make my professional life a living hell. It was a masterful campaign of psychological warfare and humiliation. I didn't tell a soul. In this place, trust is a currency I couldn't afford to spend foolishly. But deep down, in the quiet solitude of my secret investigation, I kept building my case, note by painstaking note. This was no longer about my pride. This was about a cancer that was consuming the prison from the inside out. The turning point came nearly 6 months into my silent war. It was a Tuesday, a routine transfer day, and the block was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Tommy, Marcus's former wide-eyed protégé, fell into step beside me, using the cacophony of shouting guards and rattling chains as cover. His eyes were wild with a terrifying desperation. "Vance," he whispered, his voice so low it was almost lost in the noise. "He took everything." His breath hitched, a ragged, broken sound. "My kid's birthday money. The whole account is empty. He promised me." My heart began to pound against my ribs. This was it. A direct, willing witness. But then he dropped the bombshell that changed everything. "It's not just us he's scamming. It's you. He's targeting you personally." My blood froze. Tommy explained that Marcus had found out, through his network of informants, that I had been quietly questioning his commissary dealings months ago. The public mockery wasn't random. It was targeted, vicious retaliation. He was trying to break me. But it was far worse than that. Marcus had bribed a low-level administrative clerk to get my entire personnel file. He was digging for dirt on me. My family, my finances, my address, anything he could use as leverage to own me, just like he owned everyone else. That single revelation shifted the ground beneath my feet. This wasn't just a con anymore. It was a direct threat to my life outside these walls. I knew then I could never go through official channels. If he had a clerk in his pocket, there was no telling how deep his influence went. I had to assume I was completely and utterly on my own. I continued to play the long game. Every taunt, every sneer, was now meticulously documented in my private log. I coached Tommy through filing a formal grievance about a minor, unrelated cell issue, just to teach him how to use the system and claw back some small piece of control. The tension on the block became a physical thing. Kane could feel my resolve hardening. His arrogant smirks were replaced by wary, calculating glares. One night, during a surprise lockdown, our eyes met through his cell bars. "You think that little tin badge is going to save you, Vance?" he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "I own this place. And soon, I'll own you." I just looked at him, letting a small, knowing smile touch my lips for the first time. His overconfidence had always been his greatest weakness. Then came the twist. The one detail that no one, not even I, could have ever seen coming. It turned out Tommy wasn't just another one of Kane's victims. Tommy was Marcus Kane's younger half-brother. He had been planted in the system years ago, taking the fall for a minor charge to act as an inside man, a trusted lieutenant. Marcus confided everything in him, bragging about the corrupt accountant on the outside, the fake charity he used for money laundering, all of it. But Marcus, in his infinite arrogance, made one fatal mistake. He grossly underestimated the fierce love Tommy had for his own child. When Marcus drained the small college fund that Tommy's family had painstakingly saved, he didn't just steal money, he stole a future. He didn't just break a promise, he radicalized his own blood. During a routine pat-down in the crowded yard, in a perfectly feigned stumble, Tommy pressed the small, sleek burner phone into the palm of my hand. It was the same phone I had heard all those months ago. Tommy, it turned out, had been secretly recording every single confession, every boast, every cruel laugh. As his hand pulled away, he looked me dead in the eye, his own filled with a mixture of guilt and righteous fury. His voice was a raw, guttural whisper. "He's my blood," he said, the words tearing out of him. "But he crossed a line. You have to stop him, Vance. For everyone." In that single, heart-stopping moment, I understood. I now held the weapon, the irrefutable evidence, and the perfect stage for the final act. Section 4, 30 seconds. The next morning, the air in C Block was thick with the usual pre-count boredom and simmering aggression. Marcus Kane was at his throne-like table, holding court, a supremely confident grin plastered on his face. He believed he had me on the ropes. He believed he was, and always would be, untouchable. He was profoundly, catastrophically wrong. I began my walk to the center of the block, my steps unwavering and steady. I could feel his eyes on me, then the eyes of every other inmate. A curious silence began to fall. I went directly to the officer's station, which housed the block's public address system. The officer on duty gave me a bewildered look. This was a massive breach of protocol. The intercom was reserved for riots and emergency lockdowns only. But I knew something he didn't. An anonymous tip I'd made from a payphone the day before meant the warden and a team of state investigators were already en route for a surprise inspection. All I had to do was light the fuse. With the entire block watching in stunned silence, I took a deep, steadying breath. My hand didn't shake. I held up the small, black burner phone for all to see. A confused murmur rippled through the inmates. I saw Kane's smirk falter, a flicker of uncertainty in his cold eyes. I looked directly at him, then at the large clock on the wall. The second hand ticked past the 12. I pressed play. For a single heartbeat, there was only silence. Then, Kane's own voice, smooth, arrogant, and unmistakable, boomed from every speaker on the block. "They think I'm their savior. Every last one of them." A collective, audible gasp sucked the air out of the room. Heads snapped from the speakers to a completely stunned Marcus Kane. "But I got their families' accounts drained dry. They send me their hard-earned money to hold for them. The absolute fools." The recording continued, a cascade of his own damning words. He named names of inmates whose trust he'd betrayed. He detailed the fake charity he'd set up on the outside. He laughed, a cruel, mocking laugh, about Tommy's child's college fund. Every lie, every deception, every stolen dollar, was laid bare for the very men he had so ruthlessly victimized. The gasps of disbelief turned into low, guttural growls of fury. The men in his own crew, his loyal disciples, turned to look at him, their faces a twisted mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated rage. Slim, the one who'd so viciously mocked my badge, took a physical step away from Kane as if he were radioactive. The empire Marcus had spent years meticulously building crumbled into dust in less than 30 seconds. At that precise moment, the main door to the block buzzed loudly and swung open. The warden entered, flanked by stern-faced investigators in suits and a heavily armed CERT team in full tactical gear. I had gambled everything on the timing, and it had paid off perfectly. They hadn't come for my intercom announcement. They had come for a full-scale raid based on credible, anonymous information. I had just provided the public confession. Kane's face was a grotesque mask of horror. His eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for an ally, a friendly face, but there were none left. His power had been built on a lie, and the truth had just obliterated it in a brutal public execution. He didn't even look at me. There were no fists, no final shouts of defiance. There was only the crushing, suffocating weight of his own words. Section 5, The Aftermath and the Badge. The CERT team cuffed a catatonic Marcus Kane and removed him from the block without a single word being spoken. His reign was over. As he was led away, a ghost in his own fallen kingdom, the inmates who had once mocked me and my badge stood in dead silence. Some of them met my eyes, and for the first time in my career, I saw something that looked like genuine respect. I hadn't used force. I had used the truth as a weapon. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of official investigations. The burner-phone and my private, meticulous logs became the cornerstone of a sweeping federal case against Kane and his outside network. The corrupt clerk was identified, fired, and faced her own set of charges. Federal auditors began the long, arduous process of trying to claw back the money stolen from dozens of families. Kane was transferred to a supermax facility in another state to await trial on a whole new set of federal racketeering and fraud charges. His name became a cautionary tale, a ghost story whispered in the halls. For his cooperation and testimony, Tommy was eventually granted early parole. The last time I saw him, he was walking out the front gates, a free man stepping into the sunlight. He looked back at me through the chain-link fence and just nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the hell we had both walked through. That was all that ever needed to be said between us. Looking back, no one ever mocked that simple worn-out badge on my chest again. The victory felt righteous, a psychological checkmate that delivered justice without spilling a single drop of blood. And yet, it left an indelible mark on me. I had bent the rules to their breaking point, operated in the shadows, and used a man's own family against him. To fight a monster, I had to step into the darkness and use his own tools. Was it worth it? Standing here today, I believe it was. But it taught me the most profound lesson of my career. Justice isn't always a swift, clean takedown. Sometimes, it's the slow, patient, and painful unraveling of a devastating lie. Marcus Kane is now buried in isolation, his power nothing more than a bitter memory. And I still walk these halls, my simple badge pinned to my chest, knowing now that real authority isn't found in a piece of metal, but in the courage to see the truth and the conviction to make it heard. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.